Welcome to Arcade Attack. A retro gaming podcast for up to 4 players.
Sonic Boom!
Welcome back, listeners and even viewers, to the Arcade Attack podcast. We're here. I've got James with me again. Hello, James.
How do? How is everyone?
Yeah, everyone's good, I think. And actually, they're going to be better because we've got someone else here. And it's not Dylan or Rob. It's Erik Wahlberg, a friend of the show, a friend in general, SEGA legend. He's back. He's been on a few podcasts in the past. They've been really popular. And it's a real honor again to have Erik back on the show. Hello, Erik.
Yeah, thanks. Welcome. I don't know. Great start.
That's all right.
I feel welcome. It's great to see you guys again. And I looked at how many videos that I've done with you guys, interviews between the SEGA QA and Eternal Champions. I've been in 42 podcasts with you guys.
That's mad.
Yes. King of the content.
Sarcasm. But I do have a bone to pick with you guys.
Oh.
So when I was first introduced, the very first interview, you said, Erik Wahlberg, SEGA legend. I was like, wow, I'm a legend. So the other day, I'm at Outback Steakhouse. Have you heard of that place? In the States?
Oh yeah.
And this guy, he was certainly English by his accent. He walks up to me, says, "Excuse me, where's the bathroom?" And I said, "It's over there." And he goes, "Legend," and he walks away. I was like, everybody's a legend in England. So yeah, what's the big deal? There's no big deal.
Yeah. Oh, we've been busted.
There's many subtle levels to the word.
I'm
and you're sitting top of the tree.
I'm just having fun. I'm just having fun. So yeah, again, it's awesome to be here. So cool. I'm ready to chat about SEGA QA, SEGA Soft, some electronic arts with Knockout King. So it's still retro PS1 stuff, early PS2. But yeah, I'd love to tell you guys whatever you want to hear, and I have some stories loaded up.
I can't wait. So obviously we've got some sort of unheard of stories that we can't wait to listen to, Erik. And actually our first podcast of you was just kind of whistle stop of your career. I think Michael Latham introduced us initially, and we obviously have a lot of respect for that man, and he might pop up in some of your stories, I believe. Before we go into that, I want to say thank you again for giving us a shout out, giving myself a shout out. You did a recent video, I think with David, and mine's escaped me now. Is it Kim as well? Kim Rogers.
Kim, yeah.
And this was taken, I believe, at a SEGA reunion, which I don't know how. Was it well planned? Was it kind of a weird thing that came together? I'd love to hear maybe how that SEGA reunion came about, and if there's any stories you could share about that particular event.
Yes, it was amazing. So a few of the kind of old school SEGA people had been organizing it for some time, and I got on the kind of invite list. I think basically anybody that they had contact with through Facebook or other social media was invited. And it was a really good turnout. As you saw, Tom Kalinske was there. A lot of the, top marketing people were there. Ed and Ziada, a lot of people you've had interviewed with me, Kim, obviously, David, obviously. And it was super cool to see everybody. I think it was a combination of when I walk in, I see the people and they instantly like, "Hey, Erik," it's like, we all knew what we shared back in the 90s, both culturally and as a kind of a video game movement, and the pride we have for it. And it was really cool. Everybody was just really happy to see each other. And people that I would say grudges with, because I don't think I really had any, were just super friendly. Like everybody's just happy to see everybody. Yeah. And so it was really great. Tom did talked a little bit. And that was great, except the audio. They had one of those portable speaker things. It was in a big open area bar, and so it was like kind of hard to hear him, which was unfortunate. But he was there, and he was still the same awesome, passionate guy he's always been. And that was where I got to walk up to him, which is that picture that you guys saw. I said, "Please let me take a picture with you. You don't remember me because I worked for Mike Latham." I said, "But you're my hero." And he's like, "Oh," he's on me. Okay, then. That's my hero, right? And but he was very, very gracious and just the sweetest guy. And he always was. I told you before, I worked with him sort of at Gazillion when he was on the board of directors on the Marvel Heroes MMO game. It was about 6 years ago. But yeah, it was great seeing all those people, checking in again with Ed, some people from Sega Soft, people I hadn't seen since I had left Sega, some that left while I was still at Sega. So we're talking, 25 plus years for a lot of those people.
Yeah. Bless you. I bet it was a really fun and quite a meaningful event, actually. Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, we may have another one. We may have another one where people really liked it. So, yeah, and then maybe you can somehow organize it when you guys fly over here, come into my bed.
That would be the dream, wouldn't it? That would be the
dreams
dream.
Come true. Was there, Eric? Just briefly, was there anything kind of similar to this previously, or was this kind of like the big get together? Nothing like that had been done for a while.
Well, so here's the thing. There had been some kind of impromptu get-togethers over the years, but mostly there was 2 or 3 Sega Dreamcast parties.
Wow!
But guess what? I was already gone. So I wasn't interested in going to those. I knew some of those people that were there, but it was like not my experience. And so This is the first time that was the full-on Sega reunion.
Wow.
With again, that's why you see Kalinsky and all those guys. They wouldn't show up to the Dreamcast. Like, why would they, right? So no, this is the first one. And it was, again, I think it went really well, and people are really happy to do it. So I think we'll do it again. Since I have little ones, I didn't get to stay as long as I wanted, so I'm definitely interested to go back.
Been there.
Yeah.
All been there.
Yeah.
So it was big then. Wow. Great.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It was a great turnout.
Oh, respect. Well, Eric, if you're happy, I know that you've got some amazing stories that you're happy to share to us listeners, and probably stories that maybe haven't been shared to the public before. So we feel really honoured. And we originally were going to call it like the secrets of Sega. I don't know if it's going to sort of evolve further than that, but we might go into other parts of your career. But are you happy to share a few stories about your really early days at Sega, kind of your testing days that maybe we haven't heard before? Yeah,
sure. So, some of these things might be a little bit of a rehash for old ones, so I'll try and gloss over a little bit. But, for those people who haven't listened to the other podcast, I started kind of happenstance because I was working at a grocery store that had closed down, and my roommate, who was a serial slacker, was always taking temp jobs, and he was working as a tester at Sega because it's a temp job. And so he's like, "Hey, you want to test at Sega?" And I was like, "Okay." And I have been through all the bit about kind of how I don't want to say I got discovered, but I had an opportunity because I bumped into Mike Latham while he was working on Eternal Champions, and that led to other things for me being able to kind of get his attention and get work. But some of the stuff within there that I can share that we haven't really been able to is kind of some of the kind of crazier stuff that happened.
Yeah.
What I'm going to try not to do throughout this whole thing is not incriminate anybody, except for maybe myself, because that's the only fair way to do it, right? But it's kind of funny, roll your eyes in the back of your head kind of stories, or just laughs.
We like them.
Yeah. So, but so far as the early days, so when I first came in, I wasn't really taking it seriously, and then a couple of days in, I'm like, wow, this is really cool. The energy here, and this video games, and I get paid to test video games and all that stuff. And then I started getting interested, got motivated to do that. But one of the kind of semi-salacious stories is that when a tester can become permanent, that's a big deal. Okay. Because there was 200 testers, whatever it was at its height. It was a lot. And most of them were temps, and they would get phased out after, I don't know if it was 3 to 6 months. And then if you make permanent, then you get to stay, right? Then you can become part of that crew, and you might start to get promoted to QA lead and whatever. And so because of that kind of competition, it was very hard for me to get in. Now, there was a QA manager who had a friend that was one of the testers, and there was very few slots to make permanent. And he said, "I want this guy to be permanent, not Eric." And Mike Latham was like, "No, I want Eric to be permanent because I don't want him to go." And so there was a little bit of like Mike kind of flexing his muscles and making it happen and giving me that opportunity. In fairness, it is the QA manager's kind of choice to a degree. But at the same time, I did feel that it was a bit of a nepotism. And also, again, the salacious part, I think that he saw that, Mike likes Erik, and I don't want Erik to get elevated because I have other people that I want to get elevated instead. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Little bit of politics or
a little bit of politics. And then right after I became permanent, and then it was really just maybe a handful of months after that I became an assistant producer. I will go back to the SEGA QA part, but this all is connected. There was a QA person there who was kind of historically kind of, how would I put it, very abrasive and very self-centered. And when when that person was a lead, you were like, oh no, this person's my lead QA on this. I got to deal with this person, right? And so didn't want to see me succeed either. And so my first assistant producer job, I don't even remember what it was, but I do know that it was the SEGA CD RPG. My notes didn't get a chance to load them up, but it was dang it. Too bad this is recorded live. Otherwise, I could find out what it was. But it was a SEGA CD RPG, and I had made some minor mistake. It was something where I was interfacing with QA, and she went straight to my boss's boss to complain about me. And all that did, though, was bite her in the butt, because the guy went to Mike and said, "What's going on?" I said, "Oh, no, Erik's doing great. I don't know what she's talking about." And then she ended up getting herself outed later because she continued to kind of try to bury people. I already feel like the energy of this interview is getting really weird and there's all these people that did bad things. But I have a lot of more funnier stories to tell. So I'll step back. But basically, my point is, sorry, everybody listening, is that when I first came in to get permanent, there was some resistance. Mike pushed it through because he's super awesome. Then when I became assistant producer, there's people that were jealous and tried to besmirch me early on. But again, that was kind of, pushed aside. But there was some challenges that I could have easily not ever been a producer. I could have gone back to work or had my martial art gym or whatever it was. So those, again, some politics and some things. And it sounded more interesting to me on paper when I talked about it, but I don't like this negative energy. So
no, it's cool. It's cool. I think I'll be honest with you though. I think a lot of people are going to identify with what you've just said, because although it might be, you might think, hang on, there's a bit of negative kind of tint on things here. I've got to be honest with you. I kind of experienced the same thing. I haven't been in the same industry at all, but I've experienced the same kind of process. And I've no doubt there'll be lots of people out there listening who think the same. You get into a business and there are people who put stumbling blocks in the way, whether it be purposely or not. And you kind of have to overcome things and kind of play the game a little bit. So I wouldn't beat yourself up too much about it, because I think it's quite refreshing to hear someone like yourself say that you had those struggles, because I think a lot of people would think that that kind of industry is like, oh, everyone's high-fiving and getting on great and drinking beers and all that sort of thing. But actually it's the same as any kind of organization. There are people who want to see you succeed. There are people that don't want to see you succeed. So just on the game, Erik, what year was it? Because I have some up here that I might be able to
it would have been around 94 or early 95.
I've got Vey, or I've got Luna, Eternal Blue. I've got Shining Force, et cetera. That's all Sega. That's all Sega CD RPG.
Oh, so this was a third-party game. That was called QA.
All right.
Yeah, it was this one. So this is kind of fun for you guys, as a trivia for you guys. So this is one that was very much like a tactical combat kind of thing. So it was very much an RPG, but then all these units you're moving around and characters too. There was a very much a anime style art.
Nice.
Does it ring a bell?
No, it sounds cool though, I have to say.
Yeah, it was very cool. Yeah, I was going to say, definitely something you need to.
Yeah. So I apologize for not knowing what that game was.
That's okay. That's cool.
Yeah, but anyway, so here's the good part, and I used as the kind of the motivation for me to continue to work hard, to succeed, to prove people wrong, right? Because not only were, some people maybe didn't want me to advance for kind of reasons that they want their friends to, or they wanted to, or whatever. But also there are people that just didn't believe in me, right? Because I was just some other guy, right? And so what that made is like every time when I had opportunity, I pushed myself, I applied myself, I succeeded, and it allowed me to get opportunities that, all the different companies that I did, all the different types of games and roles that I've had, all throughout. Because now, after 30 years, nobody could say that guy's a hack, right? That I've proven myself to enough people. I've done enough that I don't have to prove it anymore. But I certainly always use that. And I've had times throughout my career where people have, oh, that guy's getting paid too much, or this guy should be the lead, whatever it is. I always use those things as motivation rather than just getting upset or feeling oppressed. So that's kind of the positive spin on this, is that I did take that as positive energy.
I mean, how long would you say it? Because you were saying about proving yourself, and obviously, I'd imagine the industry is all about proving yourself, proving your worth, and kind of making sure that you're valuable in the team. What was there a point you kind of decided, oh, I've done enough here to kind of not have to every day get up and try and flex my muscles? Like, was there ever a point in that timeline?
Yeah, Thursday.
So,
I would say probably around the time that I started working at Gazillion, which was, I started working there maybe like 7.5 years ago or something. I knew that I had done things. And in reality, working at Gazillion, it was a new role for me. I was a content designer, which is I'm going in and using like low-level code to create these missions and things, which was pretty new. So I did have to work really hard at it, and it was challenging for me. But at the same time, I felt a confidence and a history. And something that's interesting, and you guys will totally understand this because this relates to anything in life. If you do something a lot, over and over and over again, your brain gets good at it. And sure. For me, it's the creative process.
Yeah.
So like whenever somebody says, we need a story with these characters, with these types of goals, and here's the assets you have, and here's the environments you can use. And I can do it lickety-split very quickly because I've connected those dots enough times. And I can also communicate it to the people that would want to either greenlight it or implement it. And so that, I think it's the confidence is probably a better thing I would say, James. It's less so much like, oh, I've already worked hard, but more so I think that I feel more confident in my skills.
That you have a kind of you've almost got like a template of a process in your head that when someone feeds you kind of, we need this, you know kind of where to start putting the blocks. Is that fair?
100%. And like my current role right now, I'm at a mobile game company called Big Wolf. And I'm a combination of lead designer, lead creative, producer, help get things implemented because it's a startup. And it's allowed me to very quickly do concepting and premise, plot, character development, and nuance of gameplay elements and all these things. Just kind of put them all together. Not necessarily amazingly better than some other guy with my experience, but more so I could do it pretty quickly. And then I could also present a few options to the executives and not just be like, here's a thing. Let's say here's A, B, and C. Right. And so that takes pressure off me, I think, as a worker of this craft, that it's a little bit easier and faster for me than it would be otherwise. And it's still fun, right? It's a creative process.
Yeah. And the experience, I suppose, delivering something to people at different levels. You can talk to someone who's a developer. You can talk to someone who's someone who does audio. You can talk to someone who's a manager or producer, etc. So that's where I suppose the experience really helps out, because you kind of how to talk everybody's language.
Yeah, you should probably do my interview because again, yeah, but no, it's true.
Sorry,
yeah, it's awesome. It's great because then it's like we're reaffirming it. So, as a producer, which I did for most of the time, like you said, I'm interfacing with all the different, parts of the development process, which is, like you said, music and art and QA and marketing, And so there's a combination of knowing what's important to them, how to talk to them, what they need, and how to connect that with the game moving forward and a process. And then also diving in as a designer later, that I also understand the designer process even more. And so then when I'm working with designers, I can really get in the nitty gritty and relate to them. as well as learn, because very important, I think, is the kind of emotional and mental connection that you have with the people you work with.
Oh, without a doubt.
Right?
Yeah.
Keep them motivated, keep them engaged, make them feel important, but honestly so, right? Not pandering. And so when you show a respect and excitement, and I still get excited when an artist says, oh, here's this new background, or here's the character, and I'll instantly say the things I love about it, because there's probably something I love about it. And then we'll go into massaging what maybe needs to change, but they're receptive, right?
Good.
Yeah. And so it's cool. It's it's a hard industry in that very few places are stable. So you're always kind of moving around, and then things change between the dynamics of what you do to the type of game, type of company. But as long as you can be flexible, it can be a really fun ride. So
Yeah.
So cool.
Is there any other Sega stories, Erik, you'd be happy to share?
Yeah. So I had one funny one. So I was there for 7 years, right? And sometime within that 7 years, there's many QA managers that were working during that time. So you can't tell who this person would be. This person was reprimanding one of my friends, coworkers, another tester, in their office. Well, this is normal. I mean, the person was doing something, screwing around, whatever it was. I don't even remember what it was, but the person was sitting in a chair behind on the other side of a desk with this QA manager in their office, and being reprimanded. And the person looks up, the person's wearing glasses, and sees in the reflection, there's porn on their glasses from this computer screen at the same time. It's like, it's one of those things where it's like a little bit of a hypocrite, right? A little bit. But I thought that was pretty hilarious. Like, I'm surfing porn. I got to deal with you kids. But so that was just kind of a funny bit. And then I know we told you a lot of stuff from QA about some of our kind of more dramatic things that happened, like when we lost one of our coworkers and things like that. That was something that was really tough for a lot of us, because a lot of us were pretty young, and so I'm sure the first time we knew anybody that got murdered. But this is again kind of that negative energy, but it's something that probably is interesting to share. This same person who tried to besmirch me when I became assistant producer, to give you an idea of what this person was like, we had an announcement by Steve Apor, if you know that name. He was QA manager of SEGA when I first started, and he was there for a little bit, then became producer. But he brought us all into one of our meeting rooms and told us that he passed. And obviously we're like, whoa, right? And he had been missing for a few days. He borrowed one of my coworkers' cars and hadn't returned the car or responded, right? And so we're all kind of like flabbergasted, and we walk out. And but Steve had said, don't worry, because Sega's going to take care of all the funeral expenses and other things for the family, right? So we walk out, and this same person says out loud to one of their friends, "Oh, I don't know why his family's getting money. He barely even worked here that long." I was like, "Wow."
But then that's true colours for you, isn't it?
Yeah.
And sadly, I've known a couple of people like that in places I've worked, and it's just ingrained in people to be kind of flippant and nasty, really, isn't it? But
it's terrible.
The good news is that the vast majority of people all kind of were on board. So
yeah, and so I'll take one more thing about Sega Test, and we had the interview. And I'm so glad. Thank you for doing that, Adrian. I think it was really fun to share all these great stories. It was absolutely a fun house. It was like a sitcom and Sega Test. Like, we were always pranking each other. We all had nicknames. We had phrases we say over and over again. It was just a blast. And then whenever there was, free pizza or any other like swag, we have some free Sega t-shirts, like we all run down the hall. It was just, aside from some of the things I had mentioned earlier that were not super positive, it was a blast. And I was so happy to have gone through that process and not just gone straight to production. And I made many friends that are still my friends today, as you know, right? That you guys know through Facebook or through interview. So Sega Test was awesome. Those are my stories for that. I have some Mike stories, but mine are actually kind of general, but some specific. But I want to speak to him as a person.
Yeah.
I think it's super important because there's been a couple times people have done interviews and they haven't spoken really highly of Mike. And I want to say what I said before, which was he's a great person. He had a good heart. He worked so hard. He cared so much about the products he was making, about the customers enjoying the products. He wanted everyone on our team to succeed, all those things. But that's not the good part that I want to share about him, is that he is someone who would always extend himself to his friends, people that were of value in his life.
Amazing.
More so. So not only like every time we went out, he'd say, we're all going to go see a movie. We're going to have dinner. We're going to do this, whatever. It would always be like, whatever you want, I'll pay for it. And it was like not even a question. When we would go on trips, same thing. Now, yes, sometimes he would be billing to SEGA, but a lot of the times he was not. And this is all it was. And I know firsthand that, rest in peace, when he passed on, he wasn't particularly rich. And so it wasn't like he had so much money. He's just throwing it around. It was because he was a generous person.
Yeah, and, amazing.
That's a really good character trait. There was a friend of mine. He was actually my best friend for about 6 years. And I met him at SEGA. His name was Harry Chavez. I'd mentioned him before. And he knew Mike really well because of the three of us and Eternal Champions and things. And he had Harry Chavez had moved to Las Vegas, which is, as you probably know, if you're a person who has any issues in your life, addiction or any other issues, that's not the best place to go. And Harry did have some challenges. And so Harry wasn't doing really great. And I don't know exactly why Mike was there, but Mike was there probably for a show or something. But he met Chavez. He gave him a full big dinner. And he was really supportive of him, I think also emotionally. And this is mentioned by one of my friends. So I found out about this later. But that's the type of guy he was. He obviously didn't tell anybody. It's like, he's like, oh yeah, I took Harry out and did these things. But he is someone who, if you're his friend, if you're someone who's his ally, and he values you, he will do anything for you. And I felt that. And again, I would not have been a producer if it wasn't for him. I would have been all the other SEGA testers trying to climb my way up to try and get a spot. And I will forever thank him for that. I do have one funny story about him though. So when we were working on Eternal Champions, Harry Chavez again and I, we were working, this is the first one for the Genesis version. We were working so many hours. And, because we're young, we survived. But I even remember, for example, that we get a phone call because the programmer would just give us a phone call if he found a bug or a QA sent a bug in the middle of the night. And so we get home at 12 at night or something. And all of a sudden, like 3 o'clock in the morning, we get a phone call. And Harry had this funny voice. He had a very raspy, kind of cool voice. And the phone ring, and he goes, Wahlberg, no, like that. Like we were just in pain, right? It's like, and so what I'm getting at with this story is that we were punchy. We were like, screw it at this point. We were working hard, but we were like, just, there was no filter, and we were just like, all we cared about was getting the job done and surviving and eating steak because we got to eat for free, so it was always steak all the time. But
good choice.
But one of the mornings, Mike was in because he would come probably every couple of weeks or something, sometimes more often, depending on where we were in the development of the game. And he came in and traditionally, because it's Mike, and at that point, Harry and I were fairly new to knowing him. Usually you don't give Mike the business in a fighting game, especially Eternal Champions, because, it's his baby, he's the boss, all this stuff, right? So he came in, we're both super tired. And we're like, okay, let's play, because we also like to play the game, which is weird that we still like to play even though we're testing all the time. So he played against us, and both Harry and I, we just creamed him. We destroyed him. And with no mercy. And we're even laughing. And here's the funny part. He was laughing too, because I think he loved the fact that it was unbridled. We don't care if you're the executive producer. We're
not holding back.
He laughed and he fell off the bed. He was laughing so hard that he fell off the bed. And I still remember that moment of him falling off the bed laughing. and just what a joyous, cool time that was. And so, to a lot of people, it might not be okay. You beat him and he fell off the bed, but Mike and those dynamics. It was really funny to see him kind of more vulnerable and just laughing, and us not giving a f about it and going for it. So, but yeah, that's kind of my Mike stories. And then I have one more, which is where he ruined my dinner. So I talked about all these great things he's done. So we were working at the headquarters in Redwood City, and we're working really late. And he'd always like, "What do you guys want for dinner?" Right? He took us up, and then it'd be the delivery service, and so whatever you want. And so I got some steak, whatever. Right? So we get our meals, and we're all tired. We're all kind of grumpy. He's grumpy, and we're all sitting around. He opens up his dinner, and he's like, "I didn't order this," right? And he takes it and he dumps it in the garbage, right? And then we're looking. I'm like, "Where's my dinner?"
Uh-oh. Got the wrong one.
Threw it in the trash. So awesome. It was the best moment. That and literally, like, I think I had basically a little bit of leftovers from everybody else because it was like 10 at night at that point, so I couldn't go to get dinner. But it's pretty funny. It's funny. He's so pissed off. I'm like, "You just threw my dinner away, Mike."
It's funny.
Yeah, but again, I just want to clear that one more time as someone who knew him closely, worked with him for years. We're not perfect. Who is? Right? Nobody's freaking perfect.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, and he was type A, right? He was driven, and I'm sure he's made mistakes. We all have. But man, he was a good person, and I'm so happy I worked for him. And I want to make sure everybody knows that he was a good guy.
Yeah, and he was always good for us for Arcade Attack. He was always answering questions and gave some great interviews. And I miss him. I know the team miss him a lot. And
I never had the pleasure, but I mean, I've formed an opinion on sort of all the kind of stories I've heard and stuff like that. And the most, I suppose, the thing that sticks out for me is the way people say kind of how inclusive he was of everybody. And that's rare. That's very, very rare for someone to be kind of that generous and that kind of always extending that olive branch to everybody. That takes a lot of work as a person to do that, and it takes a lot of energy and it takes a lot out of you. It really does. But I mean, that's the thing which stands out for me that I hear so much is that he was, it doesn't matter who you were, whatever, he'd always had time for you. And he always kind of extended that olive branch and kind of gave you a shot. So, I never had the pleasure of talking to him, but which is a shame. But sounds like an amazing guy.
Yeah. No, he was, and that's quite accurate.
Bless you. I know we miss him. Thank you, Eric. I mean, that's quite a personal few stories, and we really appreciate you sharing those. I'm sure our listeners. Really
great stuff.
Is there any other? Any other crazy stories?
Keep them going. This is great. I'm loving this.
Oh, so I have two more that are even funnier and weirder and scarier. So I'm going to tell you first about the time I was assaulted by a French stripper.
Now, there's not many times you hear someone say that.
Yeah. So if you guys do arcade shorts, you guys can get that clip. I'll tell you by the time I say, watch this podcast, you hear about this story. So essentially, another way that Mike was awesome was when we would go on our trips to the UK or related places, he would always turn it into some kind of holiday, right? And so one time in particular, it was a big, long adventure where we went to England, and we took the channel to France, went to Amsterdam, went to Russia, and and the whole time was a combination of a lot of work and some great sightseeing and other things. And so when we're in France, Mike says, "Hey, you guys want to do a sex tour, right?" And so it sounds more like fancy than it is, but basically you go to a couple strip bars and some other show. But it's by some company who, of course, is being paid to bring you to these certain places. And so one of the strip clubs we went into, it was the saddest kind of creepiest strip club I've ever been to. And I've been to many, hundreds. but
connoisseur of strip clubs.
Thousands. So walked in, and none of the people were interested in me, these women. But it was my friends anyway, so the energy is kind of a little bit, like just kind of have a good time. So we sat down, but you really have to sit down in this kind of circular kind of seating arrangement right by a stripper, right? And so basically they're kind of like assigned to a group of seats, right?
Okay.
And so, one come out, and I still remember there's this one lady, and I don't want to talk about the physicalities of it because that's not nice, but she wasn't pleasing. But she did this weird thing where she was kind of doing something, and then she'd go, bah! Like, it was almost like like she's casting some kind of spell or something, right? But then she leaves, and then some other one comes out, and she's really not my type. Like, really was not interested, right? But she was super aggressive, and she would want to like either get tips or whatever. And so she just got in our face, and she literally turned towards me with her large sized rump, and was just like bashing me in the head with it. Like, she was kind of like trying to like entertain me, and I'm literally like bashed like that. And Mike, and man, if Mike or I forget some of the guys that were there, they could tell you they were just laughing their asses off. It was the funniest thing.
Amazing.
Yeah, so that was a thing that happened. So that's my story about getting assaulted. And then the other story about SEGA, because I know we usually like keep these about an hour, right? About an hour, more or less.
Yeah, an hour's a good time. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, cool. And so the other one, I'm going to tell you about a time I almost got murdered.
Oh.
For real. James doesn't know this one, but Adrian does. Yeah, I think Adrian knows, right? Yeah. So, yeah. So I'm going to take some responsibility for being a part of a process of things that happen. And I'm not going to name. It was sometime between when I first became a producer at SEGA and when I ended my time at SEGA Soft. So I'm not going to say any names, obviously. So what happened was one of my coworkers, another producer, had gone to Japan to get some, for work for SEGA, but then also made some purchases for another person, and came back and said, okay, here's the toys I gave you. Here's how much it is. And basically what happened was the person accused that producer of trying to screw him over for the cost. And he was really getting in his face, like aggressively so. Now, this producer that was being verbally assaulted was one of the sweetest, gentlest, most subdued kind of guys. So you knew that like it's easy to push him around. He's not going to stand up for himself. Mm-hmm. And my kind of I don't know what instincts they would be, whether it just be my protective kind of side of me or whatever, not anti-bullying kind of thing. So I walked up and stood outside the cube, and I saw this happening. And the guy turned to me. He goes, He goes, what? The guy's being aggressive. Yeah. And I said something to him I shouldn't have. That was basically telling him that he was a dysfunctional, aggressive, so-and-so, whatever. Yeah. I was trying to basically divert that energy to me, right? Because I was like, stop picking on him, now deal with me. That was basically what I'm trying to do. Guy comes right up to me. I'm not afraid of you, Wahlberg, right? And so because this is, people know I did martial arts and whatever else. Probably because I would walk around in a gi all day with my black belt. No, but he things got kind of tense, right? And then he said some things. I said some things. I never physically touched him. He didn't either, but he was right in my face. And then Joyce Sakakura, who for the entire time I was there was admin for Mike Latham, wonderful, sweet, also very maternal, badass admin. She's wonderful. She came in and broke it up. And then I was like, okay, it's over, right? It's over. So years later, one of my coworkers, who's a friend with this guy, the aggressive guy, he says, oh yeah, you know what? I don't know if I ever told you, but after you had that spat with this person, he brought a gun to work for the next week.
No
Say
way.
What?
He brought a gun to work. And this person had never been arrested for any violence before. However, he had been, arrested for other things. And so he wasn't like, just a super goody two shoes. So yeah, if anything would have happened, if there would have been some new argument,
some
new verbals back and forth, It could have been guy goes into office, comes out with gun, and then Erik is not doing this interview with you guys. So yeah, here's the funniest part of it all. That guy contacted me years later to come contract with a company he was working with to do some design work. So I guess I was going to kill you a decade ago, but I could use a designer. You want? And I
need something. No one needs you.
Yeah. I had the time I came and worked with him was before I knew what happened. But I got the energy from them. He probably completely forgot it. But I don't know how you could forget bringing a gun to work. Right?
That's mad.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? And I checked our HR handbook. That is not allowed. You're not allowed to bring guns to work.
No.
Yeah.
That's. I mean,
I don't know where do you start with something like that? I mean, so how many years after did you find out that he'd brought a gun?
Probably about, I want to say maybe 5 to 10 years later.
I mean, but that still must have your heart must have sank.
Yeah.
I mean, I get that you've kind of there's a lot of change that's happened in that period, and time heals to a degree, but there must have been a part of you that was like, damn, I may not have been here now.
Well, I think here's the thing is that this person did have an erratic personality, so I think I wasn't surprised.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that was the biggest part. I mean, obviously bringing a gun to work is a big deal, but because of the person's personality and the fact that we almost came to blows, and he's like, yeah, I don't want to punch it out with this guy, so I'll just bring a gun. I was like, oh, okay, yeah. So, it's just a trip. What it did do is it reminded me what I've lived most of my life doing is don't get aggressive with people. Try and find the way to nullify an aggressive situation as long as people can be safe, right? And what I teach in my self-defense classes, I say, if you are going to ever have to fight anybody, granted there's some legal implications, be cool and then just attack. Like you don't want to elevate issues. You want to nullify it. My back's to the wall. Okay, I'm just going to fight you because I have no choice now. But in his case, I could have done it way better. I was young. I was in my 20s still.
Yeah.
I certainly would not have done the same thing now. I would have basically just said, hey, to this person who was being verbally accosted, say, hey, you all right? I would have talked to him.
Yeah.
And then stayed there and then gone to HR. Also, the thing is, HR in the 90s, almost anywhere in the United States was a little bit kind of, unless you're like a super big company. SEGA was big, but they were newly big. There was a lot of inappropriate things that would happen all the time that nowadays you're just fired. You would be like instantly fired.
Yeah.
I probably would have been fired just for that verbal altercation, like we both would have.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it's crazy. It's crazy, right? It's but that's my super crazy story that you can plug, however you want to.
I mean, oh my God. I mean, hindsight's 20/20, isn't it? You can sit there and say, oh, well, I would have done this different. Everyone can do that for things during their lives. But I mean, it's worth saying though that there's going to be a difference in reaction here, because obviously the reason we're reacting and going, oh my God, is because obviously in the UK, for UK listeners, like bringing a gun to work is like, that never happens. It doesn't happen over here.
Yeah,
obviously, over in the US, I think that there may be a slightly different opinion, but that's why we're reacting the way we are, because you don't just have guns. So.
I think even if you're from Oklahoma, it's still like not cool to bring a gun to work. I think
fair enough.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly in that environment, right? So no, you're right. Yeah, I think only because I've known this story now for, I don't know, 15, 20 years at this point. But yeah, it's crazy, but I'm not interested right now. Yeah, just because it's like, now we've done other interviews. Let me tell you something crazy that happened at SEGA. Yeah.
Man,
It was one of those places where we don't know, because I'm not going to see what that was. But yeah, so that was a real thing that happened.
That's incredible.
Are you wearing a bulletproof vest at the moment, Erik?
No, I just try to be nice. I work from home, so yeah, that's it. But other SEGA stuff. I mean, we talked about a lot of other stuff, and then I could probably talk. Let's see. I think there's something else I was going to mention about SEGA Soft.
I mean, it's been amazing so far. I mean, these stories are great.
Yeah, while I remember actually, Eric, thank you, because you gave me a good text interview for NetFighter at SegaSoft, and that actually got published in Retro Gamer magazine, which is quite a big magazine this neck of the woods, and it was very well. People really enjoyed it, so thank you again. That's a really, really interesting time of Sega, isn't it? SegaSoft. I know it's slightly detached, but what a bizarre, crazy period.
Yeah, well, so to speak to that, yes, I'm so glad. What's so wonderful about what I did is that I know you guys. I've met you guys. We've done all these cool interviews, told the stories that, and again, I mentioned this when we first did the interview, but unless you decide to delete everything, these would be things people might listen to 20, 30 years from now.
Yeah. We hope so. Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, we've no doubt.
Yeah. And so it's really cool that we can connect and share. Even I can go, I'm going to tell you about NetFighter from SegaSoft. And here's this probably very vaguely known game, right? Yeah. Because of all those dynamics of being exclusive to the platform, and he never really got, a lot of momentum. And the game, came out maybe like a year and a half before the company closed down, like all those kind of elements that happened. Yeah. But it was great. It was awesome, honored to be in that. I definitely showed it off, as you saw on Facebook. Bought more than one copy. It was awesome to do that. So thank you back. Super cool collaboration. Yeah.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah. I mean, we've got a few questions. If you're happy to answer, we chucked a few on social media. Mm-hmm. I've got one here from the Wizard. It's called @ThatWizardPod, and they're called Kidnapped by Wizards. They just want to know:
wizards.
Was the Mega Drive sound chip really as bad as the detractors say? Because some of the music from that console absolutely shreds. He also asked, what's your favorite, or who's your favorite Sega wizard or magical practitioner? So I'm not sure there's any real wizards at Sega, but maybe you can answer both those questions.
Is he only talking about music, or are you not sure?
Good question. I think that's separate questions. So what do you think about the music first? I mean, the SNES notoriously had a great sound chip. What do you reckon about the Mega Drive?
Mm-hmm. So, not being a sound engineer myself, what I can tell you is that the guy answered the question himself, or gal, is that the engineer, if they knew how to leverage the sounds and music that the chip could make, they could make good music. They make cool music. Like I love the Sega CD music, but this of Eternal Champions, but the Sega music for Eternal Champions is also really catchy, right? And it was varied and
it is
robust. Yeah, and so what I think it comes down to, how difficult was it to maybe make good music or sounds, and it may have been a little harder. It's quite possible. I didn't work with any engineers ever complained about it, and I never worked on a game that had really crappy music or sounds. I mean, if they did, maybe a few, or it's maybe just a bad developer overall, or whatever it was. So I would say it was probably more complicated or difficult to make good music on the Genesis, but it certainly could, and it has.
Yeah.
It absolutely shreds, actually. So, so far as favorite Sega wizard. So, I mean, if we talk about like game makers or so I mean, I'm a fan of Ed Annunziata, right? I just actually talked to him last week, as I briefly worked with him at Gazillion, and then of course I knew him for quite a while at Sega. Still the same guy, brilliant. He's always like, oh, what if, and this thing, and he's so into it. He's like this. I don't know how to put it. He's literally like a wizard, right? Like a wild wizard of thinking of all these ideas all the time. But there's a whole slew of them. I mean, obviously Mike, and trying to think. I mean, we're talking, kind of mostly game designery people. I would think, we had some really good development teams, right? Like I think Sega Interactive, who did. The Eternal games, they were quite talented and worked really, really hard, and gave us a really robust game. It did some great art for like Garfield, really good art. I think the gameplay stuff was not necessarily their fault. It comes down to some game design and implementation issues. But I mean, Mike's my number one guy there for all the reasons I mentioned. I have great coworkers, right? Like David Gray, brilliant. He is executive producer at Zynga, and he deserves it. Very smart, helped me out so much. So I had people that helped me. Okay, so here's a random thing I'll mention. So
Go for it.
you guys are familiar with Conan the Barbarian?
Yes.
Yes.
So,
Big fan of the films, yeah.
yeah, so Marvel had the rights to him starting, I think, around 1970 maybe. And they had the rights all the way through like the late 90s or something. One of the guys was John Buscema did it, and a couple other different artists, but one of them is Ernie Chan. And he's one of the better known, maybe the top 3 of the guys that did that. And he did them for probably like a decade or something. He became a art resource on this team separate from, but adjacent to our team at SEGA. So I got to meet Ernie Chan. He was the sweetest, most unassuming guy you'd meet. And I worked with him a few times on some game concepts, and I still have some art. I wonder if I should have brought it. Maybe for my next interview, I'll bring it out. But he did a really beautiful picture of a game concept that I had in very much his style. One of the characters was a barbarian. It's like, yeah, it's Conan. So he was somebody that I thought was just awesome. I didn't even know who he was until I saw the character. I said, that looks a lot like Conan. Who is the guy who did this? It was Ernie Chan. I went down, I met him, and he was. And unfortunately, the guy passed away like maybe 8 or 9 years ago from cancer.
Wow.
But man, what a sweet guy! Great impression on me. So that's, I think, the one kind of nugget to take out of that question.
Oh, fair. No, great little story there. I've got someone here called Gerhout Wolfman, and he's actually got 5 questions, Eric. He's desperate for you to answer.
I'll be fast then.
So, Eric, do you think that the 1990s gameplay was better than today?
So, and there's a few elements that come out that make it better or not. One thing that definitely can be the not part is a lot of games are tied into microtransactions and live services and all these other things, and say they completely rip away all the fun because you're trying to get your money. But a lot of games are not doing that. The other thing, I think the key thing is the difficulty, is that probably as early as maybe the early 2000s to late 90s, a lot of games you die and you just kind of continue. Like, go back to your last checkpoint and just continue. And even then, the games weren't super hard. And so you could usually, if you're just tenacious, you could just finish a game, which is okay, which is probably what the masses need. But because in the 90s, they were still catering more to gamers. Yeah. And so here's a common phrase you guys probably also said in the UK, which was, hey, do you beat that game yet?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. You don't say that now. Like you will say, oh, did you finish it? You'll say, did you finish the campaign, or did you finish the story, or did you? Yeah, exactly. It's not the same. It's just not the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was also, I think, even it's hit and miss. So I think development teams in the early 2000s, there was a lot of floundering. Like they're still kind of figuring their way. And there's a lot of like, hey, it's a flashy game with a cool license and crap gameplay. And there's a lot of those things that would happen just because of the dynamics of a lot of things. And then for whatever reason, either just some good development houses or good groups of people started to get together, people that were seasoned enough, almost like in the movies. And you have like these really good teams like, Firaxis and 2K and all these other, like all these different companies that are really strong and they make excellent games. I'm in love with the game called Midnight Suns.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Right. So it's by Firaxis that did XCOM 2 and it's Marvel license. It's RPG. It's card battle game. It's elegant. If you love Marvel at all, you will love it. It's a great game. And so in that way, no, they're not better. I mean, the 90s were not better, but they were different. And for a lot of games, the gameplay was supreme. Right in the 90s. Like,
agreed.
So
agreed.
So I said I would make a short answer. I could not stop talking. I didn't have any Red Bull either. So basically I would say that in a lot of ways, yes, but in some ways there's some fantastic games around nowadays.
Fair dues. The second question might overlap a little bit, but what do you most miss about the 90s gaming era?
Let's see. I think the biggest thing was you would have it in a package. It'd have a manual.
Oh yeah.
And we say this all the time. Literally, we say this every time.
I'll work on my English accent and just join you guys for your show.
Oh.
So then I think that, and then the fact that the game doesn't change. The game is the game.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's not
Agreed.
like
No updates or DLCs. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I mean, granted, a lot of us do. Oh, there's a new DLC for The Witcher. I'm excited, right? But at the same time, when you have this is the game, you're going to experience this game, and especially when it was co-op, because then you could share it with a friend.
Yeah.
Or sometimes you play against them, but I like co-op games a lot. And my friend Harry, the one I'd mentioned, we'd play every co-op game we could find that were any good. And so, like, Zombies Ate My Neighbors, and I think it was called Soldier of Fortune. Was it Bitmap Brothers? I think?
Yeah.
All those. So I miss all that stuff, and you know, you can look back at it now, so far as quality graphics and things go, like, but back then that was the apex. That was what you had, and that's why we liked crappy movies in the 70s that had okay, you know, graphics. So.
Yeah, good answer. The next question is: the Sega Mega Drive obviously is the greatest games library, or has the greatest games library on any system. What to him makes it so special? In a nutshell, why is the Genesis / Mega Drive such a special console?
Man, I mean, I think it almost seemed like the underdog console. It was, you know, against Nintendo, and it had this wonderful sounds that I still remember. I can still think of them in my head without playing a lot of these games. And it's instant nostalgia, and so many games I'd finished, and I just felt satisfied and like my life had been enhanced somehow.
Yeah, good answer. Yeah, we have many good memories of the Mega Drive, 100%.
It was cool.
It
still is.
It was, I would say, cooler than the SNES.
Yeah,
the SNES Super console, Eric.
Let's just say it. Let's just say it. It was so cool, and it was like a little bit more kind of gritty and mature. And just,
full disclosure, some of your viewers are going to hate me, is I was always turned off by super cute looking games. I would play some, but like there's many Mario games I have not played because it's just too cute.
Yeah.
As awesome as these games are.
I have to say the same.
I've only played one Zelda. And so, yeah, like I said,
Adrian's leaving the interview. That's it.
I told you I get in trouble. What's funny is Zelda's not cute anymore. Like Zelda looks cool now, but I'm playing other games now, so it's kind of like you know. But anyway, yeah, I think that I love the fact that Sega, they purposefully marketed and tried to make games that were more mature audience, more edgy, cooler.
And they were cool. That's definitely. Just thinking about the library, there's just so many great, cool that you've just really wanted to get into and play, and great memories.
Rystar, he's a big fan of Rystar. Good old Gerholtz is, and he says he personally thinks Rystar should have much more outings, more sequels. Do you think, Eric, that there's room for a new Rystar rebirth, a remaster, or even
talking of cute games?
Yeah. Well, so that was a cool game, though. Like, it was something about it that was so pleasant to play. Yeah. You know, there was something that, I mean, you know, so something I found out actually within the last few years that I didn't know was a lot of Japanese games. They weren't like developers get together, they work really hard for a year and a half, and they ship it. Quite often, a lot of these games were like iterated for years for different things. And Rystar, for example, I don't know, I'm just kind of making this up, but it very well may have had like an engine and a gameplay and these other things with kind of agnostic, unspecific kind of art and theme, and then eventually kind of molded into this game and then added all the personality and animations you'd want. Because underlying, when you have a game that looks great and has a cool kind of theme to it, but has such solid gameplay and good game design and user experience, right? Just like, you know, moving and stopping, like how it feels and looks and all those things. So I would say that, yeah, absolutely, there's room for it. The problem is, like Gunstar Heroes, it's kind of not really a well-known game. But it's cool. And if some company wanted to step up and properly market it, I think, especially market it towards the people that like the retro games, is if we know they're back, right? Like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle game and Push 4 and, you know, all
4,
So, yeah, I think I'd love to see it. The final question: if you think you were in trouble earlier, Eric, now you're going to get really into trouble because
Dun,
you want to
dun,
know
dun. Here's the big one.
what Nintendo games does Eric hate or think are overrated? You've kind of touched briefly on that. I wouldn't say you hate Mario necessarily, but
okay. So the one I think to me is overrated, and what's funny is I've probably played it the most of a lot of the Nintendo games I've played is Mario Kart.
Wow.
It's fun, but it's kind of repetitive and simple to me. Go ahead.
I'm on the same kind of lines.
Yeah,
I hate to admit it, but because I know there's a couple of guys in the AA crew that love it.
I do like some Mario Karts. I'm not going to lie,
including you.
But
SNES
maybe
has some. Okay.
So no, I was just going to say maybe I didn't catch it at the right time. Maybe
Yeah,
I wasn't in the wave.
Yeah, and but I will say on the plus side is the games that I've loved the most of SNES were was that me? I hear static.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't know what phone it is.
Okay.
She listens.
Is so many of their RPGs, right? There's so many good SNES RPGs.
Which you like? Yeah, these ones you like. Sorry.
Yeah, and actually like the Fantasy Star or something like that.
Chrono Trigger.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. So there's a lot of really good, games in there. I mean, really, it was Sega Nintendo for so many years, and it wasn't just all Sega. I mean, but yeah, Mario Kart is my overrated game.
Fair enough. Random question, but when did you have like a SNES in the Sega offices, like to compare and not to enjoy necessarily, but to almost used as sort of what's the latest games up to?
Yeah, so we certainly would buy and play competitive product when they would come out, particularly in the production teams. And then on the QA side, like they're all gamers, so a lot of them would have those games too. But I think trying to remember, like when I go like to EA or something, there would be like a room where you have like all the systems and you can go in and because it's EA, right? But we would have like somebody's office would have like the SNES or the PlayStation 1 or something like that. And then occasionally if you're a bigwig producer, you get your own, right? I need a PlayStation. I know there's one down the hall, but I want one for me. We certainly had those things. And, we played them. I mean, I did a kind of a presentation of Resident Evil 2 to like our staff because we used to do our production teams would take turns presenting a game. We would videotape and talk about the games, kind of here's what's cool about it. Here's the game. Because you have marketing folk and other people that aren't playing the games or don't know.
Yeah, sure.
And certainly a lot of great PlayStation 1 games, as we all know.
Yeah, no, fair dues. We've got a couple of Facebook questions, and you've seen these actually, Eric, and maybe you can describe it better than me, but Tony Maddy has shared a picture, a blue screen with lots of letters and numbers. It looks pretty crazy, really. And he says, what is this blue screen that sometimes appears when certain games might crash? I don't know if you recognize that particular screen, maybe you can sort of explain to our listeners.
Yeah, so it's secret code by time travelers from the future. Most probably by looking at it, it's kind of like a dev mode, because when you're making a game, you're going to have certain things turned on that will then, if there's a crash, or they might even see during the game, all kinds of different data, frame rate, and what things being engaged at the time. And so when there's a crash or an issue, it's this thing. So what that looks to me, because it looks like what's called an address checker that we had in QA, which was this monster you would put into the console and it had all these lights on it. And then it would have all these numbers. And so whenever it crashed, you'd write down all those numbers. And so it looked very similar, where it's just like the Matrix, right? Like a bunch of crap. So that's probably what it was. And some developer didn't turn it off, and it would only come when it crashed. Yeah. And as we know, another reason why 90s games were better is you could not ship a crap game that crashed all the time and get away with it.
No.
Had to be playable and yeah. Whereas, I suppose they ship them now, and it's just like, not mentioning any names, but Cyberpunk. Ship it half cooked and then patch it later. No, you couldn't get away with that. No.
Yeah, worse.
We got a question from Matt Dawson, a good friend of the show, actually, nice guy. Was it difficult moving from the development of a 2D fighter such as Eternal Champions to sort of 3D fighting games? So you mentioned Virtual Fighter, but I know you've worked in other 3D fighting games as well. Was that quite a big step?
So I think in a lot of ways, the 2D games were harder.
Wow. Because
the minutia of the frames, hit frames, reaction frames to hits, working combos together. The 2D fighting games, by their nature, would move faster. And so you'd be like, deep, heavy kick into jab, into dragon uppercut, into tornado kick, whatever. And those things would all happen in a matter of like 2.5 seconds or something.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And all those things tie in, all those elements. And I remember both, even when I was the game balancer for the Genesis version, we were working on all those frames of like the collision boxes and how long someone's in hit reaction for this hit, and making sure that a person doesn't get pushed away too much so they can continue their combo. There's all these things going on. There's different terminologies now. When we were doing it, we were scrappy. Like a lot of these guys, like, who were the Tekken, Capcom and all, and all these companies that are working on fighting games for years, they have their systems and their terminologies and everything's locked down. And we were kind of discovering it as we made it. Also, Mike did a very deep game design. Okay, credit to him. And then we had to as you start to implement it, find all these details. So that versus 3D. 3D has its own things. It still has all those elements, but things are a little slower going. And so combos especially are not the same. You're not going to be like bang, bang, bang. That being said, Virtual Fighter and all these other games that I worked on, I was the shepherd for those games. But Knockout Kings, which is a 3D fighting game, just kick people, is that that was very much a game that had combos in it, and it had some rules to it, but they weren't that difficult to kind of set up and implement, as opposed to the details and the minutia of a 2D. Yeah. You might get a different answer from some 3D folk, especially the ones that make the really good 3D games. They may say, well, here's these other things that are actually, and Knockout Kings 2000 versus Tekken 8 or whatever, there's a huge difference, right?
Yeah.
So,
course, yeah.
So I think all fighting games at this point are probably quite complicated.
Good answer. We've got probably the most important question from Mike Reese. That everyone's dying to know, Eric, and everyone's on the edge of their seats because they want to know. Mike's a lovely person, by the way, friend on Facebook. Sorry, about 99.9% of our listeners, but he wants to know who's cooler, him or myself, Adrian.
Well, I've answered on Facebook, but I do have a caveat to that. So we all know, obviously, I mean, most people are cooler than you. No offense.
Yeah, they are.
However, he is far grumpier than you are. So, there's a little bit of this and that, cooler, but I'd rather be with the less cool, pleasant guy than the guy who's going to be pissed off because his, football team's, having a crappy game.
Yeah, he doesn't support a particularly good football team. Sorry, mate.
I've seen Adrian grumpy though, to be fair.
It does happen.
It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, oh boy.
Oh dear.
That's awesome.
I think, Eric, if you're happy, I think James got a quick couple of questions, then we'll sort of wrap things up. It's been such a great chat, and I know that James is that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it was literally just a couple that I kind of I've had for some time actually. I think you touched on it a little bit earlier, but when you're designing a game and you're kind of working with an audio department, like doing the music or doing the soundtrack and doing the sound effects, etc., is it a case that you guys, work kind of collaboratively, or is it like them and us? Like you're in that room, we're in that room, and they kind of have to kind of guess, you have to guess. Like how kind of close knit is the kind of graphics and logistics and gameplay side of it to the audio side of it?
Yeah, so it does depend. Because a lot of the times now, especially, you're going to have a music or sound effects outsource contractor.
Right. Okay.
Maybe somebody that's worked with the company a lot, but they're generally not local. And then you're then collaborating with them over emails or meetings. When I was at SEGA, they had like Sega Soft. They had their Tristan Dupree, who did, I believe, both Genesis and Sega CD. Super awesome guy. He was very close to everyone's proximity. We would give feedback, but it was more like we would give him some direction, like, oh, make a blast background sound like kind of like 60s Apocalypse Now kind of vibe with like Jimi Hendrix, and he'd be like, okay, got it. And you come back with boom, right? But then you also, like recently, for example, the game that Adrian's in, kind of, where he has the Adrian Arcade, the yeah. So he's kind of I can't talk too much about it because there's a bit of an NDA kind of thing going on.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially, that game, they have an outsourced music group, and as my role kind of expands a lot of areas, they kind of put on me to kind of be the go-to guy. And so I gave some examples that said, because the game is basically a combination of, I'm going to probably mention movies that either you or other people haven't heard, but I'm going to mention them anyway. Mm-hmm. Fast Times at Ridgemont High, with a little bit of Breakfast Club, with a little bit of Hawaii Five-0. Mm-hmm. And because it has to do with pot smoking goofballs in the 80s in Hawaii. Basically,
nice.
That's the theme. All the games I'm working on are pot based, which is hilarious. But the guy, I sent him some music and said, kind of like this, an intro like that, but only can be this long. And also because it's a mobile game and it's going to loop every like minute and a half or 2 minutes max, it needs to be varied enough. You don't feel like you're listening to the same song, and then segue from beginning to end, to beginning to end, because it can't just like be the end of the song and then it just starts up again, because that's like torture, right?
Yeah.
And then, so in that case, it was just he would send stuff, I would work and get feedback from the exec team and other people, and then we'd go back and forth. So it really varies.
Just fascinates me. Yeah, it just fascinates me how like, because you would imagine that both departments would have to be in each other's pockets, but actually I've heard, I spoke to, interviewed Kevin Ripples a couple of months ago, who did the Gears of War soundtrack and among a lot of other things, and he kind of said the same thing. You know, he would get like a piece of paper on his desk and say, right, we need a bit of this, a bit of that, and it needs to sound like this, and it's like, you guys working together, you've got to have some kind of crazy link. Yeah. Because, you know, the results on some of these games, you just think, how on earth did they manage to kind of...
So you spoke to earlier, which was learning how to speak to the different disciplines, right? And so knowing how to communicate and what to say, you know, because I still remember, and I've had many times, when there'd be executives who jump in on the creative part. And, you know, for example, working on a remaster of a very popular Pogo game, and he walks in and says, yeah, when we do it, I want to see less brown and more green. Like, okay, thanks, genius, right? Like, you know, so you want to be able to inspire the artist to things that are really important, that, and also some specifics. But what I'm going to do here, though, is I want to, since we have time, I mean, this is going to be the very end here, is I want to play for you the music that we're talking about for this game.
Yes.
Yeah, we don't know what the game is yet, because I'm not allowed to say what it is.
But you've got music.
But I can still play the music. And
yes, exclusive.
If my boss finds out about it and he fires me, it was worth it.
It was worth it.
You're the boss.
There we go. Let me know if you can hear it okay. Wait for it. Just enough of a jam. It's not like crazy, like, because you get annoyed, right? So
I get the pot smoking though.
Yeah, right. Because there's all these dynamics. It's a mobile game. They're going to play it for hours. They're going to keep coming back to it. Many people play the sound off. Yes, I know that. But it feels thematic. It feels a little bit rock and roll, which is also part of the theme. It's rock and roll, pot, and
it's amazing. It sounds great.
Yeah, so that's basically it. So yeah, so it's a fun process, and it's so many things that you guys could discern. And you've mentioned a few times, James. Really, it's just a matter of like putting those into words and context and going, oh, okay, yeah. What's the audience? What are the technical, limitations? How do we maximize it? All those things and tying it all together.
Amazing.
Yeah. So it's a fun process making games, man. It's, I feel blessed 100%, especially because at 55 with my kickboxing gym, like I have arthritis and I have like my back hurts and everything. I'm glad my brain still works. And so I could be creative and make games, right? And so I'm really thankful for this whole process. It's awesome. And talking to people who played the games, I love playing this game. That I've had people walk up to me when I worked at Gazillion. This one tester who's a friend of mine now, but she walked up and said, "Oh yeah, I heard you worked on Troll Champion CD." So yeah, that's one of my favorite games. It was really cool just to get those things right. She said, "Sir," I was like, "Damn, I'm old." It's awesome, and I appreciate coming on again. I love you guys, and it's so fun, and it's so fun to see you guys with all these crazy interviews. Like, geez, you got him.
Oh, that's Adrian's the interview maestro. Can't take any credit for that.
No, I really appreciate it. And hearing these stories, like you mentioned earlier, people can listen back in 10, 20 years later in time, and it's about sharing these memories, isn't it? Because video games, they deserve that pinnacle in my eyes. I think it's a massive piece of art, really, isn't it? It's a huge industry.
Do you mind? This is minor, as you guys probably know through Facebook. I'm not making any money off this, but if I could plug my is that fine?
Yeah, plug away.
Go for it.
Cool. So something that I've been doing for a couple of years because of the pandemic initially is I play in a live Dungeons & Dragons Twitch stream. It's currently every Sunday, but these are all recorded and UK time is different and whatever. But it's called Dress to Quest is the name of our show. We do full cosplay, as especially James knows. We have the full outfit.
So good.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And I play with my daughter. She's almost 22. She plays a badass elf ranger with her bow and literally has a bow. It's a lot of fun. We screw around, but we also get serious. And we have really great stories and awesome kind of combat for people that are into Dungeons & Dragons. It's on Gen Con TV. And again, it's Dress to Quest. You could just probably Google it. We have a Facebook group. I'm not making money off this, but it's a fun hobby, and we do like to share it with people. Gen Con is a really big convention for Dungeons & Dragons. It's actually probably the biggest. It's been around since the early 70s. And then this is our Twitch kind of arm. And we're the number 2 show out of 11 shows.
Wow,
so
nice.
Our kind of moniker is "We Don't Suck." If we do better marketing. But so any of your viewers, we would love to have you look us up on YouTube.
We'll put a link, Eric. We'll put a link in the show notes so the people can click in there. I remember to do that.
What we'll also do is I'll on my journey through the socials, I'll put that out on our Instagram and Twitter pages as well. So because I know there's a lot of D&D fans out there. There's a lot of people. And I know there was a lot of interest kind of rekindled as well with people who watch Stranger Things because of that really kind of brought it kind of the fire burning back for a lot of people that may not have played it for some time. But there's a lot of fans out there. So if you want to watch, to use Eric's words, a badass Dungeons & Dragons show, check it out. But I'll put that out on the socials. But great.
No, please, any D&D fans, check it out 100%. Because
great.
Thanks, and also my OnlyFans. Just kidding.
Just fledgling right now, isn't it?
Yeah, cool.
Right, what a pleasure! Thank you so much for your time again today. I know our listeners and viewers are going to love this, but really is an honor again to have you on the show.
Amazing stories.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
And Happy Hanukkah and everything that you guys celebrate. But James, Adrian, I'm so glad I know you guys. It's been an absolute joy to go through this process.
Thank you so much as well. Pleasure and a privilege.
See you later.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast. We really hope you enjoyed it. You can tweet us at Arcade Attack UK. We're also on Facebook at facebook.com/arcadeattackuk. Check out our website at arcadeattack.co.uk for lots more retro gaming goodness and to delve into our archives. Our podcasts are also available on Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, YouTube and Apple Podcasts. Please leave us a review and a rating. We'd really appreciate it. If you'd like to support Arcade Attack, please check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/arcadeattack, which will give you access to exclusive podcasts, interviews, and other bonus content. So, until next time, take care, and we'll speak to you soon.